To welcome Vice President Al Gore. He's going to share with you a very successful collaboration across more than 100 organizations around the world, non-profits, technology companies, universities, researchers, climate experts. These individuals have been working together over the last 5 years, many on a voluntary basis, donating code, software code, time and expertise to harness the power of technology as a force for good for climate and nature. So on that note, may I welcome Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you, Kim Hui, and thank you for the wonderful leadership you provide here at the forum. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a great privilege to be a part of this panel that will start after this short presentation. And the first image here is a picture from the space station that illustrates how thin the atmosphere around the Earth is, the part that has the oxygen. It's blue because that's where the oxygen is, but unfortunately, that thin blue shell is also what we're using as an open sewer for all of the global warming pollution that we spew into it every single day. And it comes from a variety of sources, including agriculture and forest, land clearing and forest burning and mining and all of the different industrial operations. And it mounts up 175 million tons every day, and the accumulated amount now traps as much extra heat as would be released by 750,000 first-generation atomic bombs exploding every day on the Earth. That's insane for us to allow that to continue. By far, the largest source is from the burning of fossil fuels. You can see from this image that it really started increasing dramatically after World War II. And that notch in the upper right-hand corner is the pandemic, by the way, and the next notch down is the financial crisis of 08. 93% of this goes into the oceans, but the atmospheric temperatures are reaching record levels every single year. Last year, as Kim Hui said, was the hottest year ever measured by a lot. And that's the second year in a row it's been the hottest ever measured. The hottest 10 years have been the last 10 years. And I said most of it goes into the oceans, and it makes the hurricanes and cyclonic storms stronger, and it feeds the atmospheric rivers that are getting much, much bigger. One of them, Mr. Prime Minister, came over Spain from the heated Mediterranean at the end of October and dropped a whole year's worth of rain on Valencia in 8 hours, and the result was a catastrophe. My condolences to those who suffered such terrible losses. And 6 weeks earlier, an even larger event in Central and West Africa killed 1,000 people and destroyed hundreds of thousands of homes. In the United States, we had a huge storm. It affected my home state, but North Carolina got the brunt of it. It dropped as much water as the entire full flow of Niagara Falls over 600 days in just a couple of days. Really incredible. The same week, by the way, a similar event killed hundreds of people in Kathmandu, in Nepal. The heat is killing a lot of people. In the Hajj last summer, 1,300 people killed, and the combination of heat and humidity is making more of the Earth physiologically unlivable for human beings. Relatively small areas are in the unlivable category now, but they're growing. And if we do not start reducing emissions, we could see within 50 years very heavily populated areas becoming physiologically unlivable, with a huge increase in the flow of climate migration across international borders. We're already seeing in Southwest Africa, Namibia has a huge drought, and they're killing animals, including elephants, to feed the hungry during this drought. We're seeing river basins dry up. The Amazon River system in Colombia and in Brazil, of course, is at the lowest levels ever recorded. It really is a catastrophe. And of course, the drought and the heat makes the fires more common and more prevalent. We've seen it in Australia and Greece. I could go around the world and show you these, but 2 weeks ago in Los Angeles, we had dozens of people killed. They're still searching for the bodies. 12,000 properties in Los Angeles were burned up. It's going to take years for them to recover. This was a hydroclimate whiplash. The previous 2 winters had heavy rainfalls that surged the vegetative growth, but then in March the rain stopped, and they have had hardly any rain for the last 10 months. And so that was fuel for the fires, and the Santa Ana winds, 160 kilometers per hour, fed this fire. Globally, the extreme weather events related to climate have cost $3.5 trillion over the last decade. That's an increase of almost $800 billion over the previous decade. And the increase is not linear, it's exponential. Last week, just 6 days ago, the Financial Stability Board in Basel warned of financial panics being triggered by the loss of property values. 2/3 of wealth in the world is property. The Economist back in April had this cover story warning of $25 trillion of losses in the world housing market, 15% of the total over the next 25 years. How long is it going to take us to wake up and say, we have got to get this under control? How do we control it? Well, the old saying, you can only manage what you measure, is the reason that we formed Climate Trace, which now measures exactly where all of the global warming pollution is coming from. We now measure the specific point source solution sites for 660 million, the most significant, virtually all of the global warming pollution sites in the world. We have every nation, every sector and subsector of the economy, every state and province, every county, 9,000 cities. 80% of them is the first inventory they've ever had. 25% of the pollution comes from those cities. We update this monthly starting in March. It's on the site now, but we'll have monthly updates starting in March at climatetrace.org. It's all free. You can go to the site right now. A lot of people are using it. Here's how we do it. We get data constantly from 300 satellites and 30,000 ground truthing data sources, air, sea, and land-based sensors. We feed that into these machine learning algorithms and use artificial intelligence to identify all of the polluting sites. Our coalition is 13 organizations. My partner, Gavin McCormick, heads up Watt Time and is kind of the chief operating guy of all this. And it's been a wonderful coalition because we work with 160 data contributors. Some of them are here. Will Marshall from Planet Labs. Thank you, Planet Labs. And Farnham Rahanian, for the president of Carnegie Mellon, is here. Carnegie Mellon is one of our coalition members. NASA is now using it to improve their climate models. They're getting better results at JPL from using it. The World Bank, IMF, UNDP, UNEP, a lot of nations and NGOs are using it. And we're seeing a lot of corporates begin to use it in order to reduce carbon emissions in their supply chains. Here's an example with steel. You can get steel from a blast furnace mill or an electric arc mill, and the difference in pollution may be 16 times greater per ton if it's blast furnace. If we converted the blast furnace mills to electric arc, which are more efficient and better anyway, we could reduce emissions by a huge amount. Here are two mills, both operated by Nippon Steel. They get an 88% reduction by going to electric arc furnaces. And by the way, the blast furnace mills, they have to be relined every 20 years. More than a third of them are coming up for relining in the next 5 years. Why don't we organize ourselves to convert those blast furnace mills to electric arc while they're shut down anyway? We could save an enormous amount, 21 billion tons by 2050 if we just made that change. And artificial intelligence, of course, is now increasing electricity demand. Some are using this user of AI is using Climate Trace data to move their operations to less carbon-intensive grids, and they've had a huge 28% reduction in their emissions just from that. But it's not all high tech. In fact, the emissions from landfills around the world is 14 times greater than all of the AI data centers, 4 times greater than all the data centers of any kind. By the way, Andrew Forrest's Minderoo Foundation is our partner in getting this landfill data. If you just cover the landfills, it's not high tech, you can reduce the emissions by 70%. That's the difference between this uncovered landfill in Nigeria and this covered landfill in Los Angeles. We're finding a lot of data that's been hidden from view in the past. Shipping, for example, and fishing, They have these automatic identification systems, but some unsavory types turn them off and try to hide. We see them, we track them. We include that data along with all the rest. We're also finding previously hidden data from the fossil fuel industry. We're seeing this is the only sector where this has been such a persistent problem. Here's what has been reported to the UN, and here's what we've actually measured. 4 times more emissions than are being reported. Only sector where that's the case. So we're also now, for the first time, able to measure the particulate pollution, which comes in this combustion process and kills 8.7 million people a year just from the burning of fossil fuels. This is Cancer Alley, an 85-mile stretch from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Here's one of these sites. The area is color-coded to show where the majority black population is in green. See where the emissions are going? There are a lot of reasons for this, but environmental justice has to be at the heart of the energy transition and the sustainability revolution. Here's the whole of Cancer Alley. All of the polluting sites, you see these particulate emissions and coming over the majority black areas. It's horrible, really. They call this a sacrifice zone. Right in the middle of Cancer Alley is the community of Reserve, Louisiana. They have a cancer rate 50 times higher than the national average, highest cancer risk in the United States of America. The same disparities can be found in the developing world. This is South Africa. The Cape has very few particulate emissions. The coal country of Mpumalanga, the Zulu area, has a lot. We ought to be putting more renewable energy on an urgent basis in developing countries. Amazon and Apple, 2 companies that use our data, are using it to site renewable energy in places where they can offset the most emissions. But the world needs to do a better job of doing this because, for example, the single state of Florida has more solar panels than the entire continent of Africa. That's a disgrace for the global system for allocating capital, and at the same time, we're seeing 3 times as many fossil fuel pipelines under construction and proposed for construction in Africa as in all of North America. This needs to change. We're seeing also fossil fuel facilities all over with refineries and LNG terminals, extraction sites, even new coal mines. This needs to change. Now, the cost of borrowing money in places like Nigeria can be 7 times higher than the cost in wealthy countries. And the energy transition, 85% of the money has come from private capital. But most of it goes to the US, Europe, and China. And developing countries have been walled off from access to it because of the high interest rates. And you see, globally, 85% of the money has come from private capital, and that's true in the advanced countries. In Africa, only 18%. The government can't make up the difference, and that's why there's this persistent demand for more government-to-government money, which is a political challenge, to say the least. One of the many benefits, we create 3 times as many jobs in clean energy, and we now have 3 million more clean energy jobs than fossil energy jobs. So that's true in the US as well, which may make it a little bit more difficult than some believe to get rid of former President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. I hope that is the case. And it's all over the world. It's not just about the US, never has been. The IEA says that we have all the technology and the proven deployment models we need to cut emissions 50% in this decade. And we have line of sight to the rest. If we get to true net zero, temperatures will stop going up almost immediately, lag time of only 3 to 5 years. And if we stay at true net zero, approximately half of the anthropogenic CO2 will fall out of the atmosphere in as little as 25 to 30 years. So it's up to us to get this done. And young people around the world are demanding it. The only thing that we may lack in the view of some people is political will. But please always remember that political will is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Gore.